Wait, where did I put my lucky rabbit's foot? Hey y'all, my name is Prudence. You can call me Prue. I run Prudent Readings and I have a podcast slash talk show with my partner, Mason. He's been taking over the technical side of things. So it's just me interviewing these days. And we have a vibrant, very colorful guest today. I'll go ahead and let her introduce herself. We're so excited to have her in the Warren.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me to chat. I'm Kaylyn Anderson. I run a business called Kaleidoscope Ritual, where I do tarot readings, I do color magic, I do some sort of colorful art that has to do with astrology, all things working with a special love for color magic in my heart. And I'm also one of 3 aura photographers at a store in Salem called House Witch. So aura photography is my other big love for sure. And yeah, that's me. And I can't wait.
It's so beautiful. Honestly, I'm just going to jump right into, usually we save like promo stuff for the end, but what a beautiful Instagram. You guys really go find her, go follow her.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. I was scrolling through before we talked, and I've been following you for a little bit, but it's honestly, it's really fascinating too. And I think you capture like not just like the spiritual message, but the aesthetic, which is really gorgeous.
Thank you so much. One of my sort of big feelings, I guess, one of my big feelings about my own personal magic, and I don't know if you were privy to some of the like discourse that was happening in the online witch community recently around sort of aesthetics and magic and the value or the lack thereof in magic.
No, absolutely.
And for me, as a Taurus sun with a Libra rising, Venus ruled just like all over the place. I love beautiful things. I really
That makes sense.
I
Yeah.
love creating beauty. And so by no means do I think that magic has to be beautiful. There's lots of really ugly spells that are really effective for sure.
Yeah.
I think that if beauty is something that's important to you, if creating beautiful things is important to you, then yes, like find ways to make your magic really beautiful. And I think that's only going to empower it even more because you're going to feel more connected to it and more inspired by it. So yeah, definitely the aesthetics of it all are a really beautiful part of it for me. And part of the reason I am so drawn to color magic is it allows for really easy ways to incorporate like really beautiful things into your magic.
Yeah, and the aesthetic of businesses is like a really clear way to kind of communicate like what your vibe towards things are. I will say like it's ironic because our setups are literally very much like our different aesthetics. Like I have like a very black and white kind of grayscale. And when it comes to like how I read and like what I do, it's definitely like a more academic kind of like cut and dry kind of side of things. And like, I don't know, I try to like mix in and like get out of my thing, but very Sagittarian on my end. So like very the philosophy side, like the
Really?
theoretical side. And so I can see how that would be because we shouldn't be fighting each other. We should all be expressing ourselves the way we express ourselves and like bringing ourselves to our business.
100%. Like I love my monochromatic angels out there in the world. And also I have not always been the colorful queen that you see today. I definitely, and like this is really a big part of sort of like my color magic story is in my like early 20s, I was an all black all the time girl. There was a solid probably like 5 to 7 years where I refused to wear anything but black, shades of red, and occasionally a pink thrown in, but that was rare at that time. I had pink hair at the time, but that was like only pink allowed. That was only the hair, right? And that was always sort of what I said is like I like to put colors in my hair, but like always gonna be all black all the time. Like that's the uniform.
That was like a very much the vibe back then, especially for like witchcraft stuff, is like dress in all black, like keep it very like almost mournful in a way, which is like a style for sure, but like there's a time and a place for it. And like I've been trying to learn that too. The more I shop secondhand or like get hand-me-downs, the more like obviously ethical that is for fashion, but like also it pushes you out of your comfort zone. And I really found like florals are a vibe I like, but I wouldn't have moved towards them as much. Even like the florals I wore before were very muted, and kind of getting into like patterns and floral, like it's a good way to express how you're feeling on the inside. And like that signal towards other people helps your interactions with them a little bit better.
Oh, 100%. Like what you're wearing, and like there's a lot of other ways to work with color magic, but like obviously we're talking about our clothes and sort of our backgrounds right now because that's what we can see. And definitely like what you're wearing and like the colors of what you're wearing, definitely great conversation starters. Great way to just sort of signal the sort of energy that you're trying to sort of like radiate in that moment. And that's the really interesting thing for me, and part of why I think I became so passionate about color magic is during the time where I was really gravitating towards blacks and reds. And I don't think this is true for everyone. Like there are definitely goths out there who are feeling like happy-go-lucky in their spirits and by no means are needing like energetic protection. But for me personally, during those years where I was really gravitating towards those reds and blacks, I was really in a really kind of tumultuous time. There was a lot of tumultuous energy around me and sort of within me, and I was figuring a lot out. And I did sort of feel a need for protection and energetic armor, and red and black are excellent colors for protection, grounding, energetic armor. And I wasn't conscious that that's what I was doing. But in hindsight, I'm like, oh, absolutely. Like I was being drawn towards these energies that I really needed. And then when I got my first like job at House Switch, not my first job ever, but I've held a few different roles at House Switch. And when I ended up there and started to sort of come into a sense of safety and feeling a little bit less of a need to have sort of an energetic guard up.
Right. You could take like your armor off.
Yes. And that's when I started to become more and more drawn to really bright colors, pinks. And also when I started to be more comfortable expressing this like softer side of myself again, this less protective. And that really mirrors my whole journey with witchcraft, where I think at the beginning, what I really found a lot of power in was the ferocity of the archetype of the witch and this ability to protect yourself and protect the marginalized people around you and be this force of like justice and strength and healing on the margins, right? And
Yeah,
I'm
like a good
still
foundation.
100%. And I'm still extremely empowered by that side of what it means to be a witch and that side of the archetype of the witch. But also, after sort of coming out of spaces where softness and whimsy
Yeah,
were definitely sort of shamed and trivialized, after coming out of those spaces, I
right.
was really able to return to a sense of wonder. And that I think is now currently what I really find the most empowering for me about my witchcraft practice and color magic as well, is it helps me and it helps, I think, other people sometimes. I think it can help other people return to this sense of wonder that we had as children and this sense of whimsy and expression and
Yeah.
playfulness that I think is really healing ultimately for a lot of people.
And so in that, like, do you feel like you, at that point where you were wearing like a lot of darker colors, like you were the one protecting your own energy, but when you like found community, right? Like you said you worked with a lot of other people at Witch House. Do you feel like that sense of community and like protection almost like helped you come out?
100%, 100%. When I was really like not drawn to colors other than those reds and blacks, I was in a relationship that was both my first queer relationship. And so in one way I was like experiencing this amazing, like exciting, just like feeling of authenticity and just like really feeling like the pieces had fallen into place. It also was like not a great relationship in hindsight, you know, like, and this is long ago,
It
but
happens. It happens.
I was also experiencing a lot of really difficult, challenging emotions at the same time. And so there was just like a lot going on. And I did have great community and my friends. And I think my friends then also did see these really like vulnerable, not even vulnerable, but like soft, whimsical sides of my nature. But publicly with people I didn't know, I definitely consciously, like I wanted to be perceived as like unapproachable a little bit because
Absolutely.
like I wanted that protection for sure. Like I was like, I don't want everyone coming up to me. I was also living in a city at the time. And so there was just more of a vibe of like, let me just like be on my way and kind of like,
Yes, absolutely. Right. Like walking down the street, like just being like, okay, you guys, this is like super kind of aside. Are you like very empathetic? Like, do you feel like you have that like empathic kind of energy?
yeah, I mean, I don't think I would necessarily like call myself an empath because I just don't know what that means necessarily.
Yeah.
But I do think I am a very empathetic person and like always
Mhm.
have been. And also again, like a very just like whimsical person. I love like fairies and rainbows and sparkles and all of that. And when I was navigating sort of like coming into my authenticity in one way, I was also experiencing having this other side of my authenticity really kind of like pushed down,
Yeah,
where it's
absolutely.
like, that's like silly. And I also really wanted to be taken seriously. You know, I was like in my early 20s, I'm a young woman. I was like, I want people to take me seriously, you know, and like
Yeah.
feel intimidated by me for once, you know? And
Yes.
so for me, that felt really powerful. And I still stand by that. I
Mhm.
definitely don't regret dressing that way or sort of using those colors and being drawn towards those colors during that time. Because, like I said, I think it's exactly what I needed then. But yes, I think getting out of that relationship and then also eventually ending up at House Switch, where like there truly couldn't be a more supportive community for me to be a part of. I've been there for 5 years now and
Yeah.
like really love everybody there. And it's something I think about a lot and that I think we all think about a lot there is, and in Salem in general. We can take for granted, I think sometimes, which I'm in Maine, but going down to Salem, like we can take for granted sometimes being surrounded by all these people who, you know, sort of are into the same similar stuff as us
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
and don't look at us like we're totally crazy when we're like, oh my God, like I astral projected last night and, you know,
Yeah.
whatever. Um, but that is really special. And there are so many people who definitely like yearn for that because there are so many places still where, you know, we see people come through the shop all the time because it's a big tourist destination who are not from
Yeah.
around the area. And they say, you know, like in my community, like I can't be
Yep.
like talking
Definitely.
out loud about all of this stuff, you know? It's so cool to be here and see all these stores and all these people and everything. And it's like, yeah, it is really cool. And I hope we can just continue to see more and more of that.
Like the full spectrum, so to speak. We've
Mhm.
had another main guest, and we were talking about how in this specific part of New England, and like probably Massachusetts too, but not quite around there, there's still like a residual energy of like Puritanism and like definitely keeping each other tamped down. Like I always say, like I love vibrant makeup. I love really going hard with all of that. But there is like this vibe around here of like even femininity is like put on your flannel, don't wear makeup, put your hair up, really simple. And it's not like don't show your ankles type puritanism, but it's keep yourself in the like the normal, right? Like tamp
100%.
everything down, kind of like closet your personality to a degree. So like it's perfect that you found that community. Also, what a commute to get to work.
Yes, thankfully, since I'm one of 3 of our aura readers, I'm only down there a couple
Yep.
days out of the week, so I don't have to travel all that often, and I'm way in the like, at the southern edge of Maine, so it's not too bad, at all, and, I mean, if I'm being honest, I would travel kind
Yes.
of whatever distance to take aura photos.
Mhm.
So yeah, absolutely. I love Maine as well, which is why I haven't relocated down to Massachusetts, is I really love the coast of Maine. I'm really drawn to this place. So I stay here, but I go down there because that's where the witch work is. So that's where I go. And yeah, absolutely. And then other than that, you know, when I'm doing tarot readings and stuff like that, I do that from home virtually. So for a Taurus homebody like myself, that is fairly ideal, actually.
Yeah, I love virtual work. It makes things so much easier. That actually is a good segue into so what does your practice look like right now other than like, well, I mean, even in going down there. So that's where you do the photography, and then Instagram's kind of where you keep the color, and then virtually is where you do readings, or
yeah, absolutely. So Aura Photography is at House Witch. That is like House Witch's operation that I'm blessed to be a part of.
love.
And yeah, like I said, I'd filled a couple different roles there previously. And Erica, the owner, knows me as a reader as well and knows my fondness for color magic. So of course, when we got the camera, she was like, "You want to learn how to read auras?" And I was like,
love that.
Are you kidding me? Of course I do. So yeah, we do the aura photography every day down in Salem. I'm not there every day, but our other two readers, Cole and Melissa, are like absolute incredible angels as well. So like you're always going to be in good hands. And then on my own side of things with Kaleidoscope Ritual, that is sort of my virtual business with tarot readings. I also do color readings with a deck that's made by Moon Nectar Apothecary. It's like a whole color oracle. And so
Cool.
Sort of like a little bit of a hybrid between a tarot reading and an aura reading, kind of.
Yeah.
And then I also make some products. So I have some anointing oils that are inspired by the different aura colors. And I'm working on some other products right now that I'm excited to hopefully have out in spring. So yeah. Kaleidoscope Ritual is where you can find kind of all of my non-aura photography stuff. But I do also talk a lot about auras and aura photography on my Instagram, Kaleidoscope Ritual, because that's a big part of what I do. And it's so fun to share about because there's so many different kinds of auras and people are always sharing their pictures and I love seeing them.
It also adds to that diversified, because if you land on your Instagram, like it is literally like a rainbow in this gorgeous kind of way that those aura photos just like kind of work in. Do you like strategically post your colors so that it's literally just vibes?
I did for a while where I was like, okay, I'm going to try to go sort of in like a rainbow vibe where like I'll have a couple rows of like reds, but long ago, I mean, like that was like a couple years ago. If I'm being so real, have like neglected my own Instagram just a little bit over the past year. I mean, I think none of us feel like especially awesome in that space right now.
Also,
but I do love like the people, you know. But no, it's not intentional. I just like have so many colorful things around me, and also like you said, the aura photos are naturally just like so beautiful visually, which is like that's people's energy, which is like that's what's so beautiful, which is a whole thing we'll talk about. I'll talk about, but yeah, no, I definitely just sort of like as I have a photo that I want to share, throw that up there because I don't post enough as it is. So I'm just like, once I find something I feel like posting, I'm not going to question it. I'm not going to like be a perfectionist about it. I'm just going to get it up there. But I do try to keep things really bright and vibrant. And I wanted to say, and just to circle back a little bit to what you were saying about like, it can be a little bit of puritanical energy around New England, just like remnants. And growing up in the Midwest, there's not necessarily the same thing, but I always say that there's like one of the worst sins like in the Midwest is to like want attention.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so the idea of, you know, dressing boldly or dyeing your hair a bright color or wearing bright colors in general.
Individualism, right?
Exactly. I think it's a really beautiful way to rebel against like puritanical ideas and these ideas that we need to try to not draw attention to ourselves or that it's a bad thing to
the attitude of like for the good of the hive is really like a thing that you see out there where like everyone is a piece of one machine and they want everyone to be kind of a similar machine. And like
Yeah.
whether that's from like agricultural side, I know that that's like a really big theme in not to say anything negative about it, but Mormonism specifically.
Yeah, and I think there is some beautiful things about, like, I think there is a community, like, I think people do, there is a tendency to look out for one another in the Midwest. That's really beautiful. There's also like a saying that like Minnesotans will invite you like everywhere but their house. Like it can, there's a warmth and a separation there. And there definitely, I think, yeah, in my experience was a feeling of just sort of like, don't be too flashy. This isn't a fashion show, because that says that you want attention, and that is gross. When, becoming an adult and being like, wait a second, it's like totally normal and human
Yep.
to like want attention, or even when you don't want attention, to want to wear bright colors and to not mind if that results in potentially more attention than you would get if you weren't wearing bright colors. Which, like, yes, sometimes I don't want to be bothered still, and I will go out in all black 100%, like 100%. You don't need to always be in that, but that, I think, is the beautiful thing about color, is it's such a wide spectrum of energy. There's all these different shades for us to work with, and none of it's inherently non-hierarchical. So there's not bad colors and good colors for you to work with. It
Right.
depends on which direction you want your energy to sort of be going, what you want to be feeling, what you want to be radiating, and you get to choose. And there's a whole bunch of options, and you're not limited. And yeah, I think that what you said too about sort of more recently being drawn to colors and kind of experimenting a little bit more with brighter colors, that's one of the things I think color magic is really good for, is it can sort of let us take, as much as it is this beautiful aesthetic thing, it can also help us reshape the way we're looking at those aesthetics. So like, rather than going and getting a color analysis done and saying like, well, what's going to be the most flattering thing for me, and really basing what we're wearing on this outside idea of what is beautiful for us to wear. We can think about what are the different energies that are associated with these colors, and what do I want to feel like, and sort of take this like beauty standard sort of aspect of it, this conventional beauty standard aspect of it, this conventional fashion aspect of it, out of it to whatever degree we want to. We can also love like beauty and fashion in the like more conventional aspects, but it can bring a whole other dimension to the way that we're looking at the makeup we're wearing and the clothes that we're wearing and what we're putting in our home, when we really think about the energy that those colors are bringing.
Yeah, and every color kind of has a frequency, and everyone has a frequency, and that frequency is always changing. Obviously, not so much for the color, the frequency is changing, but for us, like our frequency, what we're putting out, like our aura, is something that we can change and affect. I've heard that from a lot of Reiki healers or people who work with energy, is like we kind of have our own energy, and that resonates in certain ways, and it changes, and the way it changes our mentality. And so for sure, I'll say sometimes you put on an outfit because that's a reflection of how you feel, and sometimes you put on an outfit to kind of adjust your thinking. I notice I gravitate towards yellow in that situation. Yellow is something I go towards if I like need to feel a little bit happier. Like I'll put on like my favorite yellow dress, or like a yellow kind of cardigan over something. I feel like even on days where I feel like I need to wear black to like kind of bring that protection or self-assuredness, a pop of yellow will give me like a little bit of jazz into that.
Yeah, I love that. And like, you're dead on, yellow sort of more traditionally, obviously, associations with colors vary across different cultures, across different practices, across different people's just like personal experiences. Some people just like hate a certain color for whatever reason. But yellow, pretty widely is regarded as an energy that is very joyful, very uplifting, very sunshiny. And so, yeah, you intuitively are like, yeah, when I need to feel a little brighter, a little bit more sunshiny, even when I am working my protection, like that little pop of yellow brings up the mood a little bit. And that is another really beautiful thing, I think, about color magic. And one of the things I love is it is super intuitive in a lot of ways. And so it's a really accessible doorway into these more mystical, perhaps, ideas that like we have energy, we can shift that energy, we can radiate that energy, colors have energy, plants have energy,
Absolutely.
and we can sort of
Huge
like bring
proponent for
people
plants.
down this little trail of like, color is not so hard to accept. I think it's easy for the everyday person who has no sort of spiritual inclination to accept the idea that like color can shift our mood. Being in an all blue room can feel really different than being in a lime green top to bottom room.
I will say too, like the color that you have in your room is probably like the perfect, because it's a little bit muted. So like you can relax in it, but it also probably in the morning kind of like pulls you up and like uplifts you.
I'm so happy you noticed. This wall color is like my holy grail find of
Yes.
paint. I'm truly going to put it in every place I ever live. I don't care if there's a rule wherever I'm renting like that I can't paint, whatever. I'll like repaint. I'll pay to repaint before I move out. I am putting, what is it? It's like Benjamin Moore Desert. I have the can so that I can remember.
I love that.
Desert Sunset. I call my room the Sunset Nest. And
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. And I am not paid by this paint company, but let me tell you that this paint, it's perfect because I wanted yellow, but I didn't want it to be too like, like elementary school, primary school, kind of like yellow.
You have to be able to sleep, right?
Exactly. And so I was looking for something that in brighter light would look brighter and more sort of like uplifting and zesty, and that in dimmer light would look more kind of muted and more brownish toned. And that's exactly what this does.
And you can tell that it kind of goes with like different colors, right? It would go with a blue, it would go with a green. It definitely goes with pink. Like you and the poster behind you, like really pop.
So yeah, that is like an old Sarah Faith Goddess dinner poster back there.
I love that.
But yeah, sunset tones in general are definitely my favorite. Pinks, golds, oranges. Now, at least in this moment in my life, those are the things that I gravitate towards. But I also think sometimes the colors that we're really repelled by also have like really strong medicine for us. Sometimes we're repelled by things that have something to teach us, that we kind of need. I recently had to, all of last year, really, I was working through my relationship with the color brown. I feel like we're in a really good place now. I was unknowingly preparing for the launch of Mocha Mousse as the Pantone color of the year.
Is that the Pantone color of this year?
Yeah, and I'm still a little upset because they did pick like a very grayish, not rich brown at all, which for my personal tastes is not my favorite. But again, no bad colors. That's not energetically a bad thing. It's calming for sure, which we probably all could use, definitely.
Yeah. It is kind of a representation of that energy we're all feeling, where it's like not gray, not black, but definitely muddied, kind of muddied. Yeah.
Yes, I did see a really interesting Instagram reel, and I cannot for the life. It was just like on my Discover, so I don't know who posted it.
Right.
But they were talking about the rise of brown in 2025 because they were sort of touching on Pantone picking this Mocha Mousse color for their 2025 color of the year, and talking about its attachment to sort of this quiet luxury aesthetic, and the inherent sort of sinister classism inherent in that aesthetic.
Interesting, right? Because luxury things typically aren't as vibrant as kind of like chintzy or like kitsch kind of things, which are like typically a little more affordable.
And that's at the heart of why I really love color magic, is when you really start to dive into it, the people who really throughout history have hated vibrant colors are fascists, Eurocentric white supremacists,
Yep.
classists, and also people who generally lack whimsy in a whole other less bad category.
Right.
Right?
And there is that kind of like golden, like metallic, like showy kind of richness, like because it goes with all of your metals or your like more valuable things.
And there's a connotation with browns also. And this is, again, not to say brown is a bad energy to work with. This is just an interesting thing to think about with the
Yeah.
energy of color. But brown also has this feeling of craftsmanship to it, you know, this like,
Right.
oak,
Like,
you know,
what
like this
thing?
deep, rich craftsmanship sort of oriented thing, which also makes sense that culturally we are seeing a pull towards sort of like craftsmanship as a polarity for like the absolute trash that is filling landfills everywhere that's coming from Temu and all of those places, you know what I mean?
Yes.
But yeah, color really says important things culturally, and looking at colors that have dominated sort of interior design and fashion throughout history can tell you a lot about what people were thinking, what people were valuing, what people weren't valuing. And part of the reason I do love bold colors so much myself is because I do see it as another way, just like witchcraft is in itself, another way to rebel against these systems that say, don't express yourself, don't be different, don't be too much, don't know your place. Know
Right.
your place and fit in. And we need sameness.
It's interesting too, because I think KitchenAid's color of the year is essentially the color of your walls. So KitchenAid released all of their appliances this year, and they were all like, I think it's mustard specifically.
Love that for them.
Which is interesting because KitchenAid is like, it strikes that balance between like inaccessible and accessible, right? Because if you're rich enough, you aren't too worried about what's in your kitchen because you're maybe ordering out more, or you have other people in there.
Sure.
But in like because it is also very expensive kitchenware at the same time. So it strikes that balance between what you're talking about, where it's like a brighter, like, because KitchenAid typically is like very bright colors. But I will say, when I saw the release, like they had a window display, and I was like, man, that much yellow. Yellow is a great contrast or a great complement, but like at some point it's like, don't fill your kitchen with all of that. Obviously, that's my opinion, but that's a lot.
And that's overall actually psychologically true, is like yellow is uplifting. It also can be very activating to the nervous system. That's why like caution signs are yellow. Like it puts our nervous system like at attention.
Yeah, right.
And
like,
so that's also why like when I was picking the color for my walls, like I definitely wanted that more muted, like richer sort of yellow, because especially those brighter tones of yellows, they can really like activate the nervous system in a big way. It's sort of like it's in the dosage, I think, like you said, of the yellow. A lot of times with a lot of bolder colors, it's definitely like
what you complement with it, like what you use. So color theory wise, I noticed you had some painting on not paintings, but like you painted color swatches to like compare. Do you have like an artistic background?
Not at all. I fully spent the first 26 probably years of my life saying I cannot do visual arts. I'm not a drawer. I'm not a painter. Me and all my siblings got different creative talents. My brother's a musician. My sister's really good at visual arts. I'm a dancer. That's just the way it is.
Interesting.
And just would not put a pencil to paper, was just like, could not draw to save my life. Couldn't, just thought that I can't do that.
Yeah.
And then I pulled an oracle card from the Weird Sisters Oracle deck by Casey Zabala. It's like an absolutely incredible oracle deck. Highly recommend. And in the guidebook for that deck, she gives like little spell suggestions. And one of the spell suggestions for the card I had drawn was like watercolor paint. And so I was like, you know what? Something that would be good for me to like release. I was trying to release perfectionism.
Nice.
And so I was like, let me do something I'm really bad at with no attachment to the outcome. I'm not trying to turn it into anything. Like, this is just something fun for me to do, and the product does not matter. The end product doesn't matter.
Well, you really can't control watercolors either.
Exactly.
Watercolors do their own thing, and they bleed and they interact together.
Exactly. So I was like, this is perfect for like releasing perfectionism. Not only is it like a really hard to control medium, but also it's something I know I'm not good at, like inherently or naturally. So I'm gonna have to work through these feelings that I'm trying to face, which is like the thing we all have, where like when we're not good at something immediately, we're just like, no, not doing that, you know?
100%.
And so I was like, okay, let me just like do this and be bad at it and keep doing it anyways, right?
Good for you.
And so I did that, and I ended up really loving working with watercolors, and that also like deepened my love for color even more, because I was like, oh my gosh, now I can be mixing colors, and with watercolors, seeing how they bleed together and granulate and all of these things. And through that, yeah, I have an Aquarius moon, so sometimes my ideas are difficult to articulate, I feel like, or explain.
Like put down on paper or like verbalize even.
Yes. And so I had this idea, because one of the things I loved doing when I was just first figuring out, okay, I'm going to try watercolor paints, was I watched a YouTube video about mixing your colors and making this color grid so that you could just see what are all the different blends you can make with the paints that you have, you know, with your 4 or 5 paints, whatever. And I just visually loved so much the way that these grids looked, even though they were just meant to be like a tool to reference as you were painting. Like,
well, they're a mandatory part of art education.
And I have no idea.
I never really liked doing color theory. I'm much more of like a black and white draw, which ironic because like we were talking about, but color theory has been really difficult for me. And it's interesting, not to go off on a tangent on me, but when I had to start coloring, I realized I'm so drawn towards pastels. Like the subject matter that I draw is like very serious, very like, kind of like occultish in a way, but then it was like coming out very, like once I had to add color, very pastel, and it created this like juxtaposition where like, I don't know, I'm like, one project I can think of off the top of my head is I made like a weird kind of ritual with like ghosty type guys, and once I went in to color it, they were also pastel, that I was like giving them heart faces and kind of playing into like, and I think it's because maybe I'm like a 90s baby, and the early 2000s were like, yes, you get it, like
100%.
Like the peak. And at that time, the Pantone colors were, they picked 2 colors that year, and it was Serenity Blue and Rose Quartz.
Hot.
Yeah, and that pastel vibe is really ingrained in me in a way that helped me kind of express myself in a way. I don't think I wear too many, like more geared towards jewel tones when I do dress in colors, but when it's artistic, for sure, I end up kind of going towards like more of a storybook kind of saturated pastels. And it is like, it's a journey of self-discovery you can do through color, for sure.
Yes, that is like nailed it. I love tarot. I'm a tarot reader as well. And I love tarot as a way to sort of like reflect back to us, you know, sort of what's happening for us energetically.
You've got some really cool decks too, I noticed.
Oh, 100. I have like
so
an
many
embarrassing deck collection, but I'm a Taurus. I love beautiful things. I love art. And so I've been selective about the things that I will collect so that I don't become a total hoarder, but I've accepted that tarot decks are one thing I collect. I'm never going to be a person that just has like only the decks I'm actively using in my rotation. Like, I like to have some of them, just to have them, look back on them, and occasionally admire them. And I think that's totally okay.
Are you like a gemstone person at all?
I do like crystals a lot. Again, love beautiful things for sure. I'm not the most knowledgeable about crystals. There is a lot of crossover with color magic, of course. And so because of my interest in color magic, I usually have like a general gist of sort of like what the general energies of different crystals will be, because they do align a lot with the colors of the crystals.
100%.
But definitely there are people at House Witch who know a lot more about crystals than me, not my specialty.
I'm really into gemstones, and I think that that's kind of gemstones, rocks, crystals, all that. I have like an embarrassingly big collection. And I think that that's where a lot of my color understanding magically comes from, because color theory, like I said, I was like kind of forced to learn it in art school, kind of hated it. But when it comes to gemstones, like they end up being the full spectrum of things, and you have different uses for different pieces, and different pieces have different resonations. Like that's something that I really get when I get to frequencies of colors, for sure.
Totally. And that's where one of the places where I think, where I was saying like color magic really acts as this nice accessible bridge into like more and more sort of like animistic ideas, and these ideas of different things that aren't people having energy that we can ally ourselves with. And yeah, definitely. Like I would say the next step after color magic for most people is probably crystals, 100%, because you already have like a pretty good understanding. Also candle magic, like color magic goes
very valid.
Magic, so
very valid.
You know, so I think one thing a lot of people ask us at House Witches that are just sort of starting out is they're like, well, how do I know like if I'm a candle witch or like a herb witch or this
are all everything. It's just drawn to.
Exactly. And it's like, first of all, you don't have to be one kind of practitioner. You know, you can like more than one of those things. You can work with one. I certainly do.
1000%.
Also, find, you know, sort of a place to start, and it's all connected a little bit. And so you'll follow the threads that interest you, and that'll slowly but surely bring you towards, you know, honing in on your, what feels the best for you, what feels like the best fit for your practice and your beliefs. But I think that color magic is like a really great little portal into that world for people, and one that, where you were saying at the beginning how our backgrounds are sort of different, and how even in your readings you are a little more like academic and philosophical in your approach, which I love. And for me, even my readings, like I always say, I bring like a slumber party vibe. Like I do them in my bed, you know, like it's very like unserious in a way. It's serious, you know, it's serious stuff. Like we definitely get into the nitty gritty, and, you know, there can be tears of joy. There can be, you know, we get real. But for me, one of the things I love to do is to really show people that like magic, witchcraft, spirituality doesn't have to look one way. It doesn't have to look super like refined or, you know, dark colors or taking yourself super seriously. It can look like that. If that is what is authentic to you, amazing. Like that's beautiful. If that's not what that is authentic to you though, like don't feel like you have to do that, because you can also do magic in a way that feels super joy forward and sprightly and fairy-like.
Yeah, you do have fairy energy.
Thank you. On my business card, it says suspected fae creature, because I just like, I love fairies.
On your business card? I love that.
It's very professional.
One of the quotes from an earlier episode that has really stuck with me was from Kylie, one of the girls who does like death doula work. And she had the quote, authenticity is the most divine quality. And that's something that you should search for in spirituality or witchcraft, right? Because once you have that authenticity, people will start recognizing that in you. And so many of our journeys have to do with who we pick up along the way, and who, as far as like more matured or experienced people, kind of adopt us, right? Like you must have that feeling with House Witch, right? Is like,
oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Like they notice you, and they notice like little bits of themselves, like a reflection in them, and they want to help you and like move you forward. And like if you can bring that divine kind of authenticity to yourself, then those people will find you, and you'll find beyond that. It's like step by step. It's building your own community, your own like contact list really of teachers. So
it is. The more you really radiate that authenticity and the more you connect with that so that you can really, more openly radiate it, the more the people that resonates with, like you said, are gonna be magnetized towards that, because if we're not letting that shine, they can't hear it. It's not that they don't want to see it, it's that we're not showing it. And so they can't see all this beauty that we really have available. And I also think that, like you said, it is this sort of authenticity piece. And that's why, like, I don't think in order to practice color magic, you have to dress in super bright colors every day, decorate your house with super bright colors everywhere. That's what feels authentic to me. That was like my color magic journey, where for me, so much of witchcraft has been ultimately reconnecting with things that brought me joy as a child, brought me a sense of wonder as a child that I lost touch with at some point along the way because of the stuff that we all go through adolescence, and early adulthood, and finding my way back to that. And for me, one of those things is, hot pink and sparkles and fairies, and all of that feels very magical to me and feels like part of my magic. But what I really hope to do through my work always is to reconnect people with their sense of wonder and like that wonder for them. And that doesn't come from bright colors or fairies or unicorns for everyone. Right. Everyone has that source of wonder and those things that really make them sparkle and feel alive. And I think witchcraft is an avenue back towards those things that we've lost. I think that color magic is an avenue back towards those things that we've lost touch with. And I think the more that you find yourself sort of gravitating and expressing these things that did bring you a lot of joy when you were a kid, I think for me, that's a lot of what like my very late 20s, early 30s has been. Like my post-Saturn return, honestly, has really been about like reconnecting with like my inner teen, my inner child, and like just really indulging in my like pink juicy tracksuits. And like, I have dolphin seat covers in my car. Like, it's silly, and that's okay, because at this point in my life, and again, I felt different in my early 20s, but at this point in my life, I don't feel very attached to quote unquote being taken seriously, because I know that the people who I really resonate with and like who I'm for are not going to not take me seriously just because I have pink hair or say that I might be a fairy on my business card.
Well, so much of this is taking yourself seriously. And then once you take yourself seriously, it doesn't matter what other people think.
100%. Right? It's like when people try to, and this probably happens to you as a tarot reader too, like sometimes people will try to really go hard skeptic on you and like try to get you to prove something to them. And it's like, I don't need you to believe in this, actually. Like, that's totally okay with me that you don't.
I love a skeptic, but sometimes they push it. Sometimes they push it to the point where it's like, it's gotta be, you have to leave room to at least, I don't know, if you're not leaving any room to learn anything new or to like expand, then it's just so restrictive that like, it's gonna be to the detriment of you to some point, and also like kind of hurt other people.
For sure. I think there are healthy degrees of skepticism. Absolutely. We love to see it. And it can be taken too far. But ultimately, the people, like I said, who sort of like want to really like try to get a rise out of me by being like, well, I don't think that any of that's true. I'm like, that is absolutely fine. Like,
and it's not going to shake my experience at all.
It's not going to shake my experience. I also like, I don't have a stake. This is not like a missionary type situation. Like, I am not trying to convert you. My belief has nothing to do, like, it doesn't diminish my belief whatsoever. And also, like, you are free to, like, I don't need you to believe this. And I don't think you have to believe this to be a good person either, like, at all. Like, I don't think that. And I think, yeah, what I'm trying to get at is exactly what you said, is this feeling of like, when you are being authentic in yourself and you really find yourself in that place where you feel like you have a pretty good understanding of like your beliefs, your values, and you have the experience and like a little bit of time under your belt, then it doesn't bother you very much when someone doesn't take you seriously, because you're like, well, I know I'm serious about what I do, and I know that the people who work with me and like actually experience what I do also know that I'm serious about what I do, because they have great experiences and they keep coming back, you know?
And they left themselves open enough to kind of have that.
100%.
It definitely takes like a certain amount of openness just to make it through life. But
And again, a sense of wonder, like have a little bit of sense of wonder, a sense of mystery about things. Like it's, again, there's limitations to that. Like when it comes to like, I'm just going to believe whatever I want about like health and like disregard science in that aspect. But when it comes to like how we believe our energy moves, like in a spiritual sense, and like how we think the vibration of colors is working around us. And when we're not, again, being dogmatic or trying to impose those beliefs on anyone else, then like, yeah, like what is the harm in trusting yourself in those beliefs and allowing for some uncertainty, some mystery, suspending
disbelief. Yes.
Exactly. And saying, you know, like, it could be.
It's all kind of like, there's no shame in experimentation as far as like our experience, and as far as like, I don't know, like it gets you to be a more well-rounded person. Anytime that it's like your exploration of the color brown, right? It's just gonna richen your experience in life and help you understand things a little bit better.
100, yeah, absolutely. And that's where I think also like going on a journey of sort of figuring out what your magical practice might look like, what your color magic practice might look like, what colors sort of you want to work with in order to either, like you said, amplify or sort of balance out the energy that's going on for you already. All of that is a great practice in discernment and inner authority and trusting yourself instead of looking outside for answers all the time. Again, sometimes it's great to look outside for answers. Sometimes we absolutely should like look to the experts and say, what do you have to say? And listen to them. But in a more like, again, like spiritual sense, a lot of times, like, yeah, we do need to trust that inner voice. We do need to be able to take something that, you know, a mentor or a leader is saying and take the parts that really resonate with us and be willing to say, you know, I don't know that I really align with this other thing. And that's okay. I don't have to believe everything this person says just because I like some of the things this person says.
And everyone who's right is wrong, right? I mean, nobody has all the answers. Everyone who has, I always say, the more confident someone seems in what they know, the more you should be skeptical about what they know, because of that dogmatic thing you were mentioning, where like, it's too easy to fall, like, and we were talking about this a little bit before the interview, it's too easy to fall down pipelines, and like, that's how you end up in a cult.
For really sure. It is how people fall into like really destructive cult scenarios. Absolutely. Yep. And that's where that discernment, you know, becomes so important, especially when you are doing this beautiful but complex work of suspending disbelief and being open to alternative ideas and ways of seeing things, you know, that other people absolutely will sometimes be like, you think you can talk to plants? Like, I don't know about that, you know? But again, I don't think anyone's hurting anyone by thinking they can talk to plants or by talking to plants, because I personally do believe there are people who can talk to plants.
I feel like we all do a little bit, and there is scientific research that plants do kind of react. I don't know if you've ever seen, there's a really cool documentary called The Secret Life of Plants. Yes, from the 70s. If anyone wants to look it up, you should look it up. 100%. There's a woman who like got her bonsai tree to like talk kind of, but if you look it up, this is just me. And maybe you like kind of 70s, like super psychedelic dancing. There's versions of it where they cut the super psychedelic dancing out. This is so funny. This is the opposite of our personalities, right? Like, I have to find the version where they don't have like the dancing around mushrooms in the psychedelic colors version, because it's
I want to cut that's only that.
There it exists. Trust me.
I want like a 12-hour cut just of like the psychedelic mushroom dancing on a loom.
when I tell you how many, I can't even tell you how many people I've like made sit down and watch that. And if I choose that version, they look at me and they're like, girl, what are you showing me? And I'm like, okay, I promise there's scientific studies in between these two things.
I am the right audience
But
for the mushroom dancing.
God bless. God, well, that's the fairy side, right?
That is the fairy side, 100%, 100%. Where were we?
Plants, resonation. People who like letting people have their experience, letting people kind of like move towards whatever like moves them, but also not getting dogmatic in that same thing. And also like letting people teach you without letting people influence you.
Yes. And yes, that was exactly what had spurred my next thought. That brings me back to it, is that that's part of why I love how non-hierarchical color is it's like really hard to kind of like make it super dogmatic. Like you kind of have to really itch to make colors a dogmatic kind of practice. Because again, there is such varied associations with them. And we definitely do experience, like with aura photos, people come in all the time and they're like, I'm worried I'm going to have a bad aura.
No such thing.
Exactly. We literally have on our sign, like, there are no bad auras, because there is no such thing. There isn't one way to radiate your energy that is acceptable or the right way to be doing that. And also, I think it's different for everyone. Like some people, I think, one thing we notice in aura photography is like people's auras do change, over time. Like you were saying, like people who do Reiki say like our energy field, it shifts, it changes depending on what's going on around us, how we're feeling, all that jazz. Our auras change, but over time, if you are repeatedly photographed, you usually will start to notice sort of like a baseline of colors that are like your typical sort of like one or two colors that are present for you. And I think that like, for example, some people are going to feel really amazing when they're in like a bright red energy, because that's sort of like their baseline and what they feel comfortable with. Other people might not feel so amazing in a super bright red energy because they're maybe way more comfortable and like way more in their usual baseline of a deep purple indigo aura. And that's where they're more comfortable. It doesn't make the red energy bad or good. It can be more comfortable or less comfortable for the specific person experiencing it, but it has nothing to do with an inherent morality or value of one over the other.
It's probably also that like Jane Goodall kind of quote where being observed will always inherently change the behavior of those under observation, because people might be nervous or like not from Salem, so they're like kind of taking on this whole tourist vibe, and so you probably can never really get like a photograph of what they feel like on their day-to-day life in their kind of like comfort space. So that you're always going to be capturing someone in an active position or like a nervous position, and that would change it a lot, really, right?
Absolutely. Definitely, like we've had people come in who were running late, so they were feeling really kind of like rushed and anxious when they got in, which I do try to give people like a time, like, settle in, take a few breaths. I try to give people a little time to sort of settle into their own energy after they get in. But absolutely, I always say it is like an energetic snapshot of this moment. And I think, and there are sometimes people who are like, okay, but like, I want to know like, what is like, like the essence, of me. And one of the things I think is beautiful that I think auras kind of teach us, and like color magic kind of teaches us, is like, there isn't necessarily one thing that is the essence of you.
In life, you should be on a journey. So the journey through what you're going through should change you, and you shouldn't stay stagnant, because if you stay stagnant, then that's when you're not working. And like, again, like through energy, through like talking to energy people, like if you're not changing your energy, then you're probably not working through like, you have to subscribe to this to like really feel it, like subscribe to this idea of our time on earth being a time that our soul grows, right? But if you're getting stagnant, then maybe you're not quite doing the work that you need to do to advance like your understanding, your consciousness, like that kind of thing. So
For
changing.
sure. Change is good, absolutely. And also I think there's just the aspect of we're all complex and multidimensional. And so the idea that something as beautiful as anyone's spirit could be boiled down to a couple pictures in one photograph is, of course we can't do that. Of course.
Yeah.
And I'm glad we can't, you know, I'm glad we're so much more complex than that and so much more mutable and ever evolving. And we do see people sometimes with incredibly consistent auras that are still very bright and beautiful. And so I don't necessarily think, at least when it comes to aura photography specifically, that not changing in your colors means you're stagnant in your life. Usually I think it means we're a little bit more what's that?
Like confident or self-assured or like
Yeah, or
ground.
a little bit like it would take something really big to sort of throw us out of our usual energy, you know? Whereas people who change auras a lot and have a lot of different colors in their aura are typically people who are really dynamic and mutable. They're really going to bring different aspects of themselves forward depending on what kind of situation they're in or who they're around. Not in an inauthentic way, but again, just in a really dynamic way. And so, yeah, I do think, at least, again, I think you're absolutely on with what you say about like energetically, we should always be changing and evolving. But as far as like the physical aura photo goes, change is not bad, but also staying the same is not bad. Again, they're both sort of reflections of like a different type of energy, one of which is really kind of like dynamic and situation to situation, and one that, for instance, no matter who they're around or what situation they're approaching, they're going to approach it from that blue energy perspective, unless something really big sort of jolts them out.
We see that in astrology a lot too, is not just your sun sign is like one of three things. It's also everything in your chart is either mutable, cardinal, what's the third one? Fixed, right? Exactly. So you're talking about kind of like more cardinal or fixed people, but when you run your full chart, you have a weighted score in each of those that each sign is giving a different one. And so, right? So even if your sun sign is one of those three, your chart might be more in a weighted score towards one of the other three, but typically you have all three. So on any given day, a different alignment of the planets or a different alignment of yourself could be reflecting one of those things.
Absolutely. And even moment to moment, we can see aura photos shift with people shifting what they're thinking about or where they're looking, who they're photographing with. And so
I was going to ask is if different people get different results with different photographers. What's the process like?
So I don't know so much about as far as like with different photographers, but you can take aura photos with two people, and definitely people do photograph differently depending on like if they're photographing with a separate person like next to them or not. The actual process, like when you go get your aura photo taken, at least at House Switch, is we have a camera and there's like a big photo booth that we have built in the store, and the camera has these plates attached to it that have little like silver that looks like handprints that you line your hands up on. And yes,
I'm remembering this now.
So those plates take a bunch of different readings from your hands that, from what I understand, essentially add up to like the electrical field that your body is producing. And then the camera itself is a hand modified camera that has like a series of lights inside the box. And these different colored lights are activated by whatever readings are coming through your hands. And then that image of those lights is double exposed over just like your regular Polaroid image of your physical body. And that's how out the side we get like an actual Instax Polaroid type film of your aura.
So I have read about that process before. That's so interesting that it was like designed by a man and we kind of don't know how it works, right? Isn't it like a
Yes.
really big protected kind of copyright intellectual like property how that works?
From what I understand, yes.
That's
It
so
is
cool.
like shrouded in a little bit of like mystery, absolutely. I found the work of Christina Lonsdale like incredibly helpful and supportive as I was learning how to read aura photos because there isn't a lot of information from the actual like camera
Manufacturer.
company as far as like interpreting the auras goes. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? But Christina Lonsdale, she goes by Radiant Human on like Instagram. She also has a book called Radiant Human, which I highly recommend. That was like my intro, like that was my primer. That was like how I learned to read auras, basically read aura photos.
Cool.
She was the first person, really, I think, the first person to tour all around the country with one of these cameras, and she interviewed people. So she took thousands of these photos and then interviewed people about just like what's going on in your life. How are you feeling? So that she could start to identify patterns of like,
Common
oh,
threads.
people going through stressful transitions, you know, have a red sphere over their abdomen, or lots of entrepreneurs have orange energy, all these different
Fascinating.
patterns. And so she is like a really great resource for people who are sort of interested in learning more about it as well.
Yeah.
Me too, but definitely like credit where credit is due. Christina Lonsdale was like, she has been called, I think like the New York Times called her like the Annie Leibovitz of aura photography. Like she is
Oh,
the gal. She has done
that's
like a whole bunch of celebrities auras, which are also in her book, which are really cool. Again, this is not a plug for her. I'm not getting paid by her. It's genuinely an incredible book, and she is an incredible aura photographer.
Mhm.
Um, and so yeah, you're right that it is like a little bit confusing to try to like find a lot of information about the camera. It is based off of Kirlian photography techniques, which like you said, we like sort of understand, but also like sort
No.
of don't really understand. And for me, initially I was so excited about it because I love color magic, right? And also
Yeah.
as a Taurus who also is highly intuitive, I love anytime I get a tangible something that helps me translate spiritual information into something more tangible for us.
Cool.
And so having these photos as a way to show people like, yeah, you have energy. And Melissa, one of our other readers, she, and also the owner of the shop, Erica's wife, she channeled this message when we were starting the aura photography thing of something along the lines of like, what would the world look like if every person saw themselves as an energetic being?
Hmm.
And I think that's such a powerful message because I think
Right.
the world would look a lot different if every person saw themselves as an energetic being.
Because
And
some of us like some of us don't even know how to express ourselves in a way that is authentic, or maybe we don't recognize it. I think there's a lot of variety in how people present themselves and what they're like not hiding because that seems sinister, but what's like locked up inside of them. And like to be able to see that would be so beautiful and like change so much.
yeah, like people weep a lot. Like not like so like it's not like this terrible sad experience. I think it's generally because it is really affirming to see your own energy reflected back to you and to see that it actually is quite beautiful. Um,
Right.
and feedback that we get a lot, or at least I know in my readings I get a lot with people, is that, you know, they'll say like, I've been really working on that. You know, if I say like, oh, you know, you're really blue, like that's a super communicative, you know, expressive sort of energy. And they'll be like, oh my gosh, like I've been really working on my throat, you know, really working on expressing myself and, you know,
That's
speaking more
interesting.
authentically, or like I've really been working on being more comfortable with change. And, you know, now I'm seeing all this really flexible, adaptable yellow and orange energy. And so I think it is really touching for people. And it's really touching for me as well. I always tell people like, I feel really lucky because I think a lot of people who work in like retail environments, like say, you know, like it definitely dampens their faith in humanity, which is understandable. I've worked in other retail environments that definitely did dampen my faith in humanity.
Yep.
But what
Been
I
there.
say about aura photography clients and generally, I think the people that come into House Witch, generally speaking, I think a big part of it is the type of people that House Witch just tends to attract. And also just like Kaleidoscope Ritual tends to attract for my tarot readings and stuff, tend to be sweetheart angels.
Right,
But also, even with the few people who have come in sometimes who have maybe like rubbed me a little bit the wrong way at first, that I was just like, I don't know, which again is like pretty few and far between, which I feel really blessed for.
truly.
But that has happened a lot of times. Like once I see their aura, I'm like, oh, they're actually like incredibly sensitive and are probably feeling really overwhelmed because they're trying to coordinate this whole group of people that they're with, and they're kind of taking the lead on like logistics, and they really want everyone to be happy because they're like a really sensitive, caring person, or like, you know, these different insights, like you said, to things that again people aren't hiding, but that we're not necessarily seeing like on the physical surface of things. And I think for people to get to see them about themselves, that's really beautiful. And I think for me to get to see that about people so often, it does really like, it does make me have more faith in humanity. And it does make me, I think, honestly, like feel a little bit more grace with people just like in the rest of my life, and like in the rest of my movement through the world, because I do see myself and them as energetic beings. And it is just sort of like, you know what, like maybe that vibration is just not jiving with mine right now. And that could be for any host of reasons. And like, there doesn't have to be any reality assigned to it.
I'm like I've always been like a really social person, to like not quite the point of like just focusing on like taking up space in a room, but also like individually, like I've always tried to make sure to like learn people's names and say hello by their name and like acknowledge them. And what I'll say throughout all of those relationships that I've built is some of the best people that you'll have or some of the most authentic relationships that I've found, not everyone probably will have this experience, are with shy people or people who come off mean at first because they're guarded and they're trying to keep their relationships limited, or like they will end up being some of the most interesting, diverse people, and also some of the most protective, beautiful people you'll meet, for sure. Like,
absolutely. Most of like my closest friends are people who at first I was like, do they like me or do they hate me? Like,
yes.
I like really cannot figure it out. And I think it's partially also because like I am a Taurus sun and I'm also an Aries Venus. So I think that I love like a tough nut to crack, where I'm just like a guarded Cancer. I'm just like, let me at them. Like I am going to just like make you so soft and tender. Like it's gonna be great. But absolutely, I agree that I think I'm not that type of person.
Yep.
But I definitely, yeah, a lot of the people who are a little harder to get to know initially,
it's worth it.
It's so worth it.
It's always worth it. And you should have people in your life who are like color theory, right? Complementary colors doesn't necessarily mean that they go together, but they'll always contrast each other in a way that brings out more hues in each other, right? So the relationships that we have, it's what you were talking about with people's auras changing depending on who they're taking pictures with, is we bring vibrations and frequencies and colors out in each other, that it's so important to make sure that you maybe like you are a guarded person, but let the people who are trying to get to know you in, and it deepens your understanding of yourself. And like you were saying, it deepens your understanding of other people and the world around you too.
100%. And I think that like, actually, no, I don't have anything to add to that. I think you put it perfectly.
I love that. Yes. You seem like someone who's like a very big social butterfly. And also certain people will be, do you find that certain people are almost like guarded in that they, not judgmentally, but like they could never see themselves like that colorful and that vibrant. And so like there's a suspicion almost around you?
Definitely. Well, yeah, like definitely we get people, not so much I think necessarily because they're like suspicious of like seeing that vibrance, But just generally, I think, you know, people have like a healthy dose of skepticism mostly. I've personally never encountered someone, at least with aura photography, that has come in and been like rude, like skeptical to a point of rudeness or
Yeah.
like
Well, they
being
wouldn't end up in Salem anyway, right?
generally the kind of skepticism we experience in that context is like, you know, a boyfriend that's been brought along for the ride for a couple's aura photo, and like he doesn't really know what's going on, but like he wants to make her happy, you know, and like
Supportive at least.
generally they're great sports. And what I've noticed is like almost every time they are like they leave being like, wow, like that was like a lot more interesting and like detailed, like that was kind of crazy, you know? And you can see sort of like, again, that little portal opening of sort of like, like, is a little bit more magic in the
Yeah.
world, you know, that there is a little more belief in magic, I think, when those kinds of people leave.
Yeah.
And so I don't mind those kinds of encounters at all, actually, because that's exactly what I'm trying to do is, like I said, like, I love opening the door or just sort of like holding the hand a little bit for someone to start a similar journey to me of like rediscovering this sense of magic. Cause like, I'm sorry, but if you believe that plants and colors and animals and crystals and all these things around us like have energy and we can wield our energy like to manifest intentions and we can wield our energy to help support and heal others and all these things, how can you not feel a little bit enchanted by the world, you know?
It opens your heart up a little bit. Absolutely.
Exactly.
And it starts to help us keep ourselves, right, like a little more accountable because we can see that there's a common thread and we can see that there's something bigger than us. You've touched on a couple themes that we've gone over in other episodes, and one of the ones I'll say is I had a very academic type reader who was talking about when he was reading for a woman who was on the verge of like no longer being with us, kind of taking herself out. She got a bad tarot reading, and he was like, "I'm so sorry you got a bad tarot reading." And she said, "Well, if it makes you feel better at all, that affirmed my belief in spirituality enough that I'm gonna stick with life, you know?" And so it even the people who kind of are skeptical or have harder things going on, just that belief that there's more can be so affirming.
Definitely. And one of the things that I think is really powerful about like witchcraft in that context is, and this depends on the practice as well, because there's definitely practices that are very like deity heavy that
Mhm.
have a lot to do with power and magic that comes from outside sources. And I love that. Love that. I also think that there's a lot of practices that do really focus on the amount of power we have intrinsically
I
and the
kind of
power
find
and the power that comes from the connection we
that.
have with these other energies as well. And I think for people who like we were sort of talking about earlier, for people who have been like a little bit averse to other kinds of spirituality because they did feel like they were being controlled, or they didn't like the feeling of having to follow a certain set of rules and sort of accept all of them or accept
Mhm.
none of them, there are these avenues for witchcraft. For me, and the way I've practiced it and the way a lot of people practice it, can be this really beautiful avenue for discovering like how much power you
Personal
have.
power,
Exactly.
empowering yourself, because we can believe in
Exactly.
destiny, but we can also believe that we shape our destiny. And that is such a nuanced kind of take that it takes experience, knowledge, growing, kind of like not just the acceptance that there's maybe more than us, but also the acceptance that that's always going to be changing.
Yeah, and that like ultimately I think the real power in it is in this sense of connection, where it is like whether we're thinking about it from this more personal power sense or whether it is a spirituality that centers more around certain deities or a certain, you know, spirits that we're worshiping or working with. Ultimately, I think a lot of these more folk-based, more witchcraft-based type
Yeah.
of spiritualities put a sense of connection to the world around us. And like a certain sense, again, and this is not sweeping, but a lot of them, there is more of a non-hierarchical kind of structure to like humans are not necessarily the end all be all of like
Right.
you know, and like we're not necessarily inherently more worthy of life than
Right.
another, you know, than that little plant or that little bug or whatever it might be. And again, there's nuance to that, and there's complexity, and there's all kinds of really deep conversations philosophically to be had about that. But
There's
I
a lot
think
of food for thought to take in.
there is, but I think one thing that can never hurt is definitely recognizing that like our energy doesn't exist in a vacuum, and we are an energetic being, and we do have an effect on other energies around us, and we are connected to other energies around us, and that can fuel us, and that can fuel them, or that can drain us, and that can drain them. Like it is what we make it. But this balance, I think, is really beautiful of like personal power that can come from it, and also this deep sense of connection and recognizing that it actually like isn't about like just me for me, you know?
And so much of witchcraft is empowering marginalized people who feel like the power maybe externally has been taken from them. I was having a conversation recently with someone who was talking about how hard it is to find ingredients, or how hard it is to like keep expensive herbs and things. And I kind of had to remind her that like the most powerful or like influential people in witchcraft have been people who don't have access. And in that like discovery of power, like maybe you don't have access, maybe you don't have like even access to books, right? I mean, like even information at some point is something that is like a privilege to have. But the people who created witchcraft practices, the people who've like really pioneered spirituality, are all of these people who have needed to find power and have found it through intuition and action and activation and community. And so even if you feel like you need to be protected, like maybe you don't need the most expensive herbs or black salt, which is the hardest thing to track down on earth. Apparently, I feel like we have all had that experience of walking around being like, do you have black salt? And people being like, no. Make your own. Take the ashes around your house. Like maybe the ashes in your hearth are even protective enough to just grind into whatever salt you have and create what you need. And maybe it didn't come from a store, maybe it's not blessed by a monk, but it's what you have, and you find that power in yourself in making it. And that's so much part of the ritual.
I think that's exactly right. And that also like ties in with my feelings about sort of aesthetics and magic, in the sense that like, yes, like if you want to make a really beautiful ritual that would look gorgeous on Pinterest, then like amazing. Don't do it for the Pinterest, but like if you want to make a Pinterest worthy ritual, make a Pinterest worthy ritual, make it visually beautiful. If you've got the means, if you've got the access, if you have the inspiration and you have the desire, do it. If you don't have any of those things, that doesn't make you any less magical. It also doesn't make it any less magical that it's all prettied up and sparkly, right? Absolutely. It's all about what you are doing, the practitioner, what you are doing, the energy you're working with, how it looks aesthetically. Again, like it's only important to the extent that it's important to you as an individual. And that is so important, because I do think it can be a hurdle for people when they think like, and even in the specific context of color magic, I want to point out, like, to think we need all these different colored candles for different spells. I love a colored candle. It's my favorite thing. However, at the dawn of witchcraft, which there is no dawn of witchcraft, but if we go way back, when sort of candle magic was very popular and like was sort of coming about, people didn't have access to like dyes or colors, things. You did that is relatively new. And again, just because something's new doesn't mean it's less magical. Just because something's old doesn't mean it's more magical. But we definitely don't have to feel like, okay, like, well, now that I know about candle magic and the different colors that are associated with these different candles, like, how am I going to do a love spell if I can't find a pink or a red candle? And it's like, you know what? Like, use a beeswax candle, use
A
birthday
crayon,
candle,
melt a crayon onto it.
use a crayon, you know,
Yes.
get creative. And that's the other thing is I think witchcraft encourages creativity.
Yeah.
And when it's done in the best way, for me at least, it definitely encourages creativity, and that's a really beautiful thing. And that's something that, again, like, not everyone gets the chance to flex that muscle, is encouraged to flex that muscle all that often. And so to see people's faces light up sometimes when they say, you know, like, okay, well, if I want to do, you know, XYZ, like, what are the steps? And you're sort of like, well, you could do this, you could do that, you could do this. Like, you can kind of pick which one of those avenues like might feel right for you. And to see them kind of light up when they're like, wait, so you mean like I don't have to
I
do
get to
it like
decide.
one way? Like,
Yeah.
you I'm the power that be?
Yes.
And
Well, it's
that's
like
so exciting.
real estate, right? Real estate, they say location, location, location. Witchcraft, intention, intention, intention. Even if you can just sit down, clear your mind, and like put your thought to something, that is just as powerful. Well, maybe not just as, but a lot of ritual, right, is like the intention of collecting these ingredients, the intention of setting them out a certain way. And if
Yes.
you don't have the space to set them out, I mean, so many of us are limited on space. So many of us are limited on resources. And you really taking care of yourself and your mind and then like clearing it and making sure that you're gearing yourself towards something. I mean, that's half of what a ritual is anyway. And so a ritual can happen just within you. And like, I don't know, these days, especially with the economy and the judgment around people or like the pressure to make it Pinterest worthy, like
Yes.
finding it within yourself and centering yourself is like a huge part of being able to do anything.
Absolutely. And that's, again, I think one of the most beautiful things about, like, at least my own personal practice, and I think a
Mhm.
lot of other people's personal practice, is it is something that ultimately is just for them. Even though, like, yeah, I share about my practice online, there's also stuff I don't share about my practice
Exactly.
online that is entirely just for me. And then other things that, yeah, I can't wait to share about because I love
Mhm.
to talk about it and I love to do it. And I want more people to experience, hopefully, the wonder and the excitement and the magic that it's brought into my own life. But yeah, I digress there.
Well, one thing I want to touch on just like really quick is this really interesting recurring theme that I've had with energy workers, including someone who showed a book. Chrissy's episode, if anyone's keeping up, she showed a book and she was talking about research she's been doing into our hands as the center of where our chi is, like our energy. And energy workers who we've talked about kind of like hot hands, cold hands, having to do with the energy that we're working with or should be working with or could be working with, that
Mhm.
I think is really interesting to tie kind of a common thread through these interviews in with the way that color photography works, right? Like,
Yeah, with the hand plates.
yeah, like you're reading that energy. And I'm like a really passionate kind of about palmistry. I think it's way too complex for me to study or like, well, study, I will study it, but to do for other people. But so much of our energy and our personality can be found through our hands. And I think that there's something worth being said that color photography or a photography comes through our hands too.
I agree. And that's something that really resonates with me. Again, as I keep being like, as a Taurus sun, but like truly as a Taurus sun, I'm super sensory driven. I'm super tactile. I'm all of that. And yeah, I do think there is,
Yeah,
when we, even in tarot, right? We think of the magician and like his hand and the wand, and like
right.
hands, is
Conduits of energy.
like powerful, magical, symbolic, absolutely. And so I do think it's very magical that we get these readings from the hand that inform the colors that come up through the aura photo. And I also think that's part of actually what makes witchcraft really resonate for me personally as like a spiritual practice is, and I think for anyone who maybe is, even though I have an earth sun, I'm very airy. And so meditating, focusing my intention, all of these things, it's really hard for me to just like sit down and do.
Yeah.
And be still. It was like a game changer for me when I found out you could like do moving meditation. And like
Yes.
it doesn't have to involve sitting still in one place. And so I do think that having these sensory inputs during a ritual, like incense burning or like herbs that I'm touching with my hands and I'm
Right. It's an
helps
active use of your
amplify my
hand.
attention and my focus so much to have. Not only do I think do they act as actual energetic and like spiritual allies, but also the tactile and sensory experience of working with them helps amplify my own intention and focus.
And focus is a huge one. That is like getting to the heart of what I was saying with rituals being about intention, is when you're like touching, moving, because so much of ritual is like, even if you're in a small space or a big space, like moving things around. That's so interesting. And even in tarot, we really I don't know if you subscribe to this idea, but I'm a huge believer that the energy that we're putting into the shuffle has to do with the outcome that we get. And so that again is a time where we're really pushing the energy literally out of us into something.
Yeah.
That is so cool. I love to pull common threads through, and I almost feel like this is like in these interviews have become almost like a research kind of thing for me. And like when hands come in, and I'm not just hands obviously, but jazz fingers. But
the
whenever
most powerful magic of all
is jazz fingers. Props to Liza Minnelli. She really taught us how to do it. Sorry, just not to be goofy for a second, but the common threads that are coming through are really interesting to me. And so much of all of this is so connected, because you can't do one thing without, well, you can do one thing without the rest, but if you do one thing, it will inform the next thing you do. And like that focus and ritual, right, that's why we get like colored candles or like certain herbs that do certain things. Is not just like because like certain things like cinnamon and cayenne you use to like heat things up, to like there's like hot foot powder and like certain little spells you do, and it has to do with how these things feel and also the color that they like invoke a feeling in you. And so yeah, bringing in focus is a really interesting way to kind of look at color in ritual work. Interesting. I really love that you work color throughout all of it, and you kind of like are a representation. You're a representative of the rainbow.
Thank you so much. That's maybe like the highest compliment I could ever receive. I'll have to add that to my business card, representative of the rainbow. But no, I do want to be a representative of the rainbow, because yeah, I do think whether you want to wear bright colors, whatever your personal tastes are for what colors really resonate with you, either energetically or even just aesthetically, you know, like I said, there are sometimes colors that really resonate with you, like energetically, that maybe you just don't really like to wear. And like, that's totally okay. You can find other ways to work with those colors. You can even just meditate and visualize yourself being surrounded, you know, by a bubble of energy that's color, is that color.
I do that with blue.
You know, exactly. And so, yeah, there's all these different beautiful ways you can work with it. And all of it, I think, is a beautiful way to self-reflect, go a little deeper into like just who you are and what your desires are. And also, especially when we're going into the brights and bolds of it all, a really like small but accessible and powerful in its own way to resist the forces of fascism and monotony and sameness and all of that. Again, a small way. It's not the only way we should be resisting those things, is by donning our bright outfits. But the fascists do hate to see you in a bright outfit. So just something to consider, you know?
Yeah. Also, like dyeing your hair. Like if you want to feel empowered, I'm a huge proponent for dyeing your hair a little bit. When it was 2020 and everyone was like stuck inside and feeling really stifled, I went bright red, then I went purple. And granted, I used, don't don't use basically fabric dye. I can't remember what the brand is that I used, but
Was
I
it
had
Splat?
it was black. Yes. I did red splat and then I did blue splat over it and then
Did
I
the
did
red ever come out?
no, I think
No.
you can probably still find it. I've had like 3 hairdressers who get so mad at me. Actually, the
No,
last
I mean, gorgeous hair though. Like
the last
definitely the
hairdresser
length and texture of my envy.
oh, it is a curse and a blessing, especially because I'm a bun head. I
Sure.
think the last hairdresser actually got it out. It was really
Oh, no,
visible for a
it
long
looks
time.
huge.
Love it. Hair by Caroline, South Portland. Cannot recommend enough. She
Love it. Hair by
really
Caroline.
but it took, I'm not kidding you, 3 hairdressers being like, girl, we cannot get this pink out. But at some point I was like, okay, blonde with a hint of pink is like a feminine, nice vibe. Who knows? Maybe it
That's
was like a vibe that didn't want to leave me.
yeah, it was just hanging on. That is admittedly part of the reason. I've had my hair also like every color in the book except red. I've never done red. Every other color pretty much, or black. I've never done black either.
That would be really striking on you.
Thank you. I feel like I'm a little too pink for it, but we'll
Mhm.
never say never. I do feel like I've been pink for the last forever, basically. And I will admit that part of the reason is that like pink has a nice fade for sure. Like it fades to a
Oh my
nice,
God.
you
Yes.
know, it's nice. Whereas like I've had blues, I've had greens, and like the fade on a green, not always what you want. Not always what you
And
want.
oh my God, no, green hair is so bold, so difficult. Blue hair will become green hair. Just
Yep.
God bless. But well, one thing I'll say about red is if you ever do try it, it fades to pink.
Yeah.
Because
So that would be also my saving grace, is like very much fades right back into my comfort zone right there in pink. But I
I
do
mean,
encourage people, yes, like experiment. And that's something I think color magic can also be a doorway to, is like
mhm.
getting a little more experimental with like your hair, your makeup, your clothing, because
Makeup.
you're not thinking so much about like, well, is it a color that's in style? You're not thinking about all these outside things. You're just purely thinking of it from sort of this like, well, how do I want to feel? And how does that color make me feel? And like, how can
Yeah.
I be creative with it?
Makeup is such a great way to do that too, because it always kind of like pulls out your confidence. Granted, some people are like a little clumsy at first, but like practice it, watch the YouTubers. Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely went through and maybe I could get back into it. I think eyeshadow is something I like abandoned
Same.
recently. And I used it Valentine's Day. I like really went into red. Like I went hard with the red look
Love.
and I put on some eyeshadow and it just really kind of pulled in a little bit of confidence for me and also complemented the look, you know. But there's something inherently magic about makeup, I think, personally.
Yeah, I
Same
mean,
with
like
jewelry.
glamour, like absolutely adorning yourself as a Venus ruled girly. Again, like I am all about adorning yourself as a ritual, adorning
Mhm.
your space as a ritual. And it's not the only way to do that. You don't have to, again, do pretty magic, but there are a lot of ways to do pretty magic, and I do love them. And I do think that they actually, like we were saying earlier, can actually reshape our ideas about like conventional beauty and sort of like these more sinister, oppressive ideas of what beauty is, when we do start to look at aesthetics more from this vantage point of what feels magical to us than what feels most acceptable to us.
It's so interesting too. We were talking about elements that are like oppositional to our charts earlier, and I was like, I don't know if I do that as much. And this is something we were talking about from the episode with Fernie. But I have a lot of fire, water, and air in my chart and not a lot of earth. And I actually don't know if anyone can tell, but this nose ring has a little green piece of onyx in it. And I intentionally chose that to wear every single day. And it's because it's plant-like to me. And plants would be like kind of an earthy energy, which is opposition, maybe not oppositional because there's a lot of water in my chart. And I don't know that I wouldn't call them opposite, but green, I pull green in as much as I can and it comforts me. And it's actually something that's lacking in my chart. So yeah, and that's that idea of brown, right? Is like something that feels opposite that maybe you wouldn't normally be drawn to. Like, don't be afraid to explore that.
Exactly. Like, don't be afraid to like go towards it. Yeah. And like be like, why? Like, why? Am I so like rubbed the wrong way by that? Sometimes it is just because you're rubbed the wrong way by something and it is not, your vibe, it's not your vibe, and that's totally fine. But a lot of times in my experience, especially when we're talking more specifically about sort of like magical ingredients, whether we're looking at colors, plants, even like astrological signs,
Yeah.
your own chart and in other people's charts that sort of like, like get us on edge. A lot of times, like
It's
there
something
is
lacking.
right some bitter medicine for us to swallow there, that ultimately will be really healing for us in the end. Not always. Don't like sometimes your instinct is saying go away from that thing or that person. Like we don't want to be around it, and that is like valid, but other times it's just our little lizard brain going, that is challenging me in uncomfortable ways, and I don't want to feel challenged in my ideas, so I'm just gonna go away from it. And
I love
let
that.
yourself be challenged.
I love that because it's also like, it's so interesting. Like the last piece, like I always say that there's 4 questions, but the 5th question that I always like mean to mention to people is advice. And so many readers will just go ahead and give the advice, right? Like I don't even have to ask. Like you ended off on advice anyway, which is perfect. Like I would say the idiom for the advice is right, like live your life in the full spectrum.
100. I always say radiate the rainbow, you know?
Yes.
And yeah, it is. Live your life to the full spectrum. Don't feel like you have to
Restrict
be.
yourself.
Don't restrict yourself. Don't base your expression off of the ideas of what other people have deemed is
Yes.
acceptable for you.
Right.
Definitely don't sort of focus your expression or your beliefs around a fear of being seen,
Or
because then
like
you
let other people tamp you down. I mean, when you mention like fighting fascism with bright colors, like don't let other people tell you how to cut, like don't let other people tell you to cut yourself down or even like how to tone yourself down, literally with
and
color.
challenge, like ultimately I do think a lot of these ideas of like that I feel like color magic challenges, and that I think in general sort of really embodying this like fairy sparkles, like bright
Mhm.
colors sort of energy challenges, is this idea that in order to be an intelligent person, in order to be a person to be taken seriously, in order to be a spiritual person, you have to, usually the general consensus would be, you have to fit pretty rigidly within like a pretty masculine, a Western masculine idea
Right.
of what it is to be a serious person of authority. And I disagree. And I think that the more people we can see in whatever positions they are in life, I
Mhm.
obviously work a very fairy-like job, but I wish I would see more lawyers, more doctors, more,
Mhm.
people with these more conventionally serious professions expressing. And there are some people who are doing that. And I think it's amazing, expressing these like whimsical side of themselves to be like, listen, you don't have to be a person who is stripped of joy and wonder in order to be a person who is intelligent, well-rounded, thoughtful, and should be taken seriously.
That would be an interesting thing. I know, I think corporations are moving more away from this for like obviously profit-driven reasons, but a lot of corporations used to have like part of their retreats be like psychic readings and stuff like that. Like I know my favorite author on palmistry, well, one of them, would be hired by corporations to do palm readings for people because then the bosses hiring people would have like a better idea of where to put them and what their strengths and weaknesses would be. But it would be really interesting to see if there was like a corporation or like a business that would want to do like aura photography as like a group bonding
We've done that.
experience. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
so
we
cool.
actually did have a company who, like, for like a wellness week that they were doing,
Yeah.
like had us come in and take aura photos of their whole staff. So that was like super fun. And it was
Yeah.
pretty cool to see because actually, like, you could sort of see when you laid them all out based on the different colors, they were kind of split up by like
Positions
the
they were in.
department. Like a lot of people in like sales would have a similar aura, a lot of people in, HR would have a similar aura. And so it was pretty cool to see that, definitely.
I wonder how much of that is like us picking up the energy of who we're around every day. Because if you work with someone in a department, you're literally probably cubicle to cubicle passing that energy around.
Yeah, and I know, like, and this will be sort of like my last little note, but I know like for me, one of our other aura readers, Melissa, we were working closely together one day for like an hour or two, and we don't normally like work together for very long because we're both doing aura photography. So if I'm there, she's usually not, and vice versa.
Right.
But at the end, we took each other's aura photos because we were like testing out some settings on the camera. And we don't normally have very similar auras, like just baseline auras. And we had identical, like, and they were there was a lot of different colors going on. And so it was even stranger that like every single splotch of color was the same and in the same spot. And it was definitely because like we were mirroring each other's energy and sort of picking up on each other's energy as two sort of like highly intuitive people working in close quarters together.
Yeah. And if you have like a good relationship with them, then like I bet you more than like, because you would assume like maybe one person is dominant in that and the other person is just receiving it. But I bet you how much it would be interesting to experiment and see how much one person started with an aura and the other person and how those interwove, because I would guess that it comes from each of you kind of giving each other, because that's teamwork, right? You feel it when you're working a job.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that was a really cool thing to like, again, see visually, because it is like with energy, we feel it, you know, even like I can't see auras visually without the assistance of the camera. I'm working on it because would love to be able to. And I think it's a skill that can be cultivated. But train of thought just went whoop.
But how much we influence each other.
Oh, yes. It was really affirming and cool to see like we all feel energy. We all have had experiences where we meet someone and we immediately are drawn to them, or we meet someone and we're immediately like, I don't know about that. But to see it reflected visually, I think, again, is part of the thing that really like opens up this like feeling of wonder for people of like, oh yeah, like,
like it's
energy
an affirming
real, the vibes I get are real. I know some people like hate the word vibes, but I'm just like, I don't have a better one. So like, you know, we all pick up on it to varying degrees, and to see it visually, at least in one format, you know, this is one algorithm that visualizes it for us. I think every psychic has like their own psychic algorithm that is not more or less than correct than a different psychic algorithm. But yeah, that's absolutely like really fascinating. And again, I think just brings such a sense of magic and wonder for people who don't always think about that in their day-to-day life, to be like, oh yeah, like
this is like such a small thing that I'm just gonna sneak in here real quick. Do you ever take pictures of objects and the objects have it? Because everything has vibrations.
So because there's like the hand plates have sensors that like line up with different acupressure points on your hands.
Yep.
We have like taken photos with no hands on the plates, and there is nothing, like nothing will show up. It doesn't like generate an aura if there is nothing on the plates. We also like sometimes people will photograph with like their baby or their pets, and obviously their baby or their pet can't have like the hands on the plate. But a lot of times, not every time, but a lot of times the pet or the baby will still show up with like a little orb of color around them, like their own little mini aura, even though they don't have like a hand physically on any of the plates.
Or even like the aura of the person on the plates might be affecting an area like that, like in you get what I mean, right? Like
maybe the interaction of their energy creating this like visual.
Right. Like they're in the area where they're holding them, their own aura is changing to adjust to the vibe, the vibes, to adjust to the aura of the person or the pet.
Beautiful. I love, like, it's one of my favorite things to do is photograph people like with their babies and with their pets, because it's super cool to see the energetic connections between people and their kiddos and their fur babies.
Or anyone, really.
Yeah, I mean, any relationship photo at all is always like a really beautiful thing to see.
So what you're doing is really experimenting. You're kind of a scientist in a way.
Yeah, again, Aquarius moon, like I'm very just like, let's just like see what's going on here. It's wacky and it's weird and it's not totally explainable, and that's the way I like it.
Well, but it is one of the more scientific practices, really. I mean, especially when you're doing experiments and noticing things and like kind of taking note of them.
And that's part of what I love about Christina Lonsdale's work so much, is that it is, and again, as a Taurus, like I am clearly not the biggest skeptic in the world, but I do like a little bit of sort of like, I like some information. And yeah, to have Christina Lonsdale's work of all these different interviews she's done, yes, it's anecdotal data, but it's still a huge data set of like amazing information that these people have shared and that she's collected. And like you said, over time myself, just photographing people, I do start to notice interesting trends. One really interesting one I've noticed recently that I haven't like read anywhere else or seen anywhere else, but occasionally people will photograph with like a big band of white over their head. There's a few different reasons that can come through that we sort of have seen typically, but one more recently that has sprung up is a lot of people who work in birth or death fields, like death doulas, labor and delivery nurses. So I think there's like some psychopomp kind of energy there, this like moving between worlds, which makes sense, right? Full spectrum light. Yes. But yeah, you do start to notice through talking to people and through these interactions, it's really fun. And it is really experimental to sort of be like, oh yeah, like what are these trends I'm noticing? What is the feedback I'm getting? And how can that like just keep informing me?
That is fascinating. One of the quotes that my mom always says, because I kind of come from a slightly mediumistic family who doesn't practice mediumship, but like one of the quotes that's been kind of passed down my family is places aren't haunted, people are. And like I'm a big proponent for we carry our ghosts with us, kind of. And that's a really interesting thing for me to hear coming from my background.
Yeah.
This gave me so much to think about. I know that we've gone on for a long time, but
thank you, by the way, for letting me just like ramble on and on about all of this.
I was gonna say, I feel like I could ask you questions forever. If you ever want to come back on, I always say people can reach out to me if you want another like episode or to go into something specific, like super open to that idea. But for like a finishing thought, where can people find you? How can they support you?
Of course, yes. Thank you so much again. This has been like truly a blast and a pleasure. I also feel like I could talk to you for so much longer. But yes, where people can find me, I'm Kaleidoscope Ritual, pretty much everywhere. I'm on Instagram. I'm going to be on Blue Sky. I haven't made it yet, but like hopefully no one's taken Kaleidoscope Ritual there yet. In the near future, you can hopefully find me on Blue Sky under the same name. And also my website is kaleidoscoperitual.com. That's where you can book a tarot reading with me, a color magic reading with me. You can get the anointing oils there. And then of course you can come get your aura photo taken at House Witch. No guarantee that it'll be me, like I said, but Cole and Melissa are treasures. So definitely come to House Witch, see all our beautiful treasures and the treasures that are our aura photographers. And yeah, those are pretty much the places you can find me. I think that's all of them.
I love that. I'm also kind of on the verge of Blue Sky. I know that it's like the more ethical one, and I'm sure that maybe there's more visibility just because of less saturation, maybe. I'm
such a visual person that I like, that's the thing is I honestly like, I love the visually based nature of Instagram. I just wish it wasn't like an entirely corrupt platform run by,
absolutely.
Here. But yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely not planning personally on deleting my Instagram entirely anytime soon, because for me, my business at this juncture is still a little too dependent on it to manage doing that. But definitely we're bringing Blue Sky, I think, into the family. And on my website, you can sign up for my newsletter as well. And that's like the best place because the algorithm can't work against you or me there. If I'm trying to talk to you and you want to hear from me,
yes,
you there. For sure. If you sign up for the newsletter, I know it will
we talk about that a decent amount. If you want to get in touch with a reader, we all have emails. You can find our emails. Email is the best way to contact us. If you don't get a response, it probably went to spam. I'm sorry that your email gets marked as spam. Instagram's really difficult to get in contact with, but Yeah, some people have their numbers. That's kind of sketchy.
I did that for a while at the beginning of my practice, which, by the way, I love that this is the Lucky Rabbit podcast because my very first tarot business was called Rabbit Heart Tarot. So
oh, beautiful. Like the Florence and the Machine song.
Well, it was actually based off of this like folk tale about like this rabbit that like sacrifices himself and then ends up being this rabbit in the moon. There's like, I think it's a Chinese folk tale, maybe. Don't look at that. It was a long time ago that I read it. Yeah. But it was a beautiful folk tale about like a rabbit that sacrifices himself. And if you look at the moon, you actually like instead of a man in the moon, you can see like a little rabbit in the moon.
Love that.
Yeah. It was more about like self-sacrifice, which was an identity I was more attached to in my early 20s that I definitely sort of shed, which is like why I eventually moved on from that name. As I was like, I don't think actually my purpose is to just like sacrifice everything.
Yeah, you kind of went from the nighttime into the daytime.
Right. But I still love rabbits as a symbol in general. It was just that the specific way I was working with that symbolism was no longer registering for me. But I still have such a soft spot in my heart for like all rabbits and symbolism and rabbits in general as well. I had some pet rabbits for a while. And
God bless them. They are a stressful pet, but they're a great pet. They're
so
like
high maintenance, but so lovely.
Yes, they have so much personality and they're so great. And it is such a gamble when you get one, what you're gonna get.
Yeah, it's like cats times like 10 as far as just like you don't know what kind of personality you're gonna get. They're kind of destructive a lot or very destructive a lot of the time. Like they might be a smuggler, they might be terrified of everything.
Yeah.
They're
toddlers. They'll hold a grudge. They'll be fun. They'll be cuddly, but they will always be stubborn.
And that's the best. But I mean, it's definitely, I feel like the people who like cats, like if you take it, like 5 degrees deeper, it's like the people who like rabbits who are just like, no, I like an animal who is like fairly frequently kind of actively spiteful for no reason. Like so headstrong because I see myself in that, you know?
Yeah, I'm a vegetarian and I think that that's a huge part of my connection to them is just like you love a pet you can share your food with.
Oh, yes. Oh my gosh, I love that.
A lot of psychics I've noticed have connections to rabbits. And when you look at animal symbolism, I learned this recently. Rabbits are like symbolic of people who can kind of like see the future or are interested in the future because rabbits literally see things before they happen.
Oh, like, yeah.
Rabbits' eyes work in a way, I won't go off on the whole tangent, but
I mean, I love animal facts, so like I'm here.
The rear view mirror of a car, objects are closer than they seem. It's the opposite of that. Oh, wait, no, it's the same as that. So that's why they're always able to react ahead of time because their eyes are technically processing things as like a foot closer than they are.
Oh my gosh.
Yes.
I love that. I love that. And also, I just feel like as a prey animal, you know, they are very like, they're alert, they're intuitive, they're like sensing everything, you know, they're sensing the vibes. Like,
from the air.
They are sensing the vibes all the time. Absolutely. I remember being like, when I had mine, R.I.P. That was long ago, but I remember like being so scared to even vacuum because like I was like, I don't want to scare you and give you a heart attack by like startling you with the vacuum. You're like such a sensitive little creature. Like it was always just like, how do I minimize like any jarring?
You can't wear shoes around them. Your rabbit literally will not recognize you if you wear shoes. And it's one of those things that I'm always like, you hear me, I'm talking to you, you know that I'm over here, but it is what it is. We love them.
They're such silly little creatures. We do love them.
And so if you'll get a rabbit drawing, and we can talk about this after I stop the recording. But send me a picture of a rabbit that you feel like you identify with, and I'll try to work in whatever you want to work in. I've kind of been going intuitively, and I mean to ask people more, but for the most part, I think people at least tell me they like their rabbit drawings, but everyone who's against me gets a rabbit.
I'm so honored and excited. I saw the other like rabbit drawings and I was like, am I gonna get a rabbit drawing for me?
Absolutely.
So I'll definitely browse some rabbit images to see some inspiration for my soul rabbit, but I can't wait to see also
I
your
love it.
intuitive take on my soul rabbit, because all the ones you've made have been so cutie.
I always try to like work a little bit into like the conversation that we had. I like to like channel my inner tarot card artist, you know
I
what I mean?
love that.
Symbolism in. Cool. So that makes our show. Again, my name is Prudence. I run Prudent Readings. If you find me on any social media that I have Instagram, I have a website. It's all just Prudent Readings. And obviously, if you're here, you have found me somehow. So this has been the Lucky Rabbits podcast. Talk show, whatever we call it. It's a podcast, but I like the term talk show a lot better. So, all right. Have a good day, y'all.